feel like a lot of people have this idea that no one is good enough. They say that no one is worth their time. No one can do this for them. No one's going to love them, the way that they love other people. And while that all seems, realistic because you've dealt with these things and you've had your own experiences, and all these experiences have pointed you to the same conclusion that, this is true. There is no one that's going to love you. I feel like it's very hard to kind of break away from this mindset, and it's very hard to have this optimism that it is possible to find this love. And I feel like this is something that so many people have. So many people have this idea that what they're looking for and what they're able to do for someone is not possible. No one is going to be able to love them the way that they love other people. And I feel like that in itself should be a reason you love people, though. That in itself is a reason to go out of your way and be that same love. That love that you're looking for is something that you're able to have on your own. That is where I think it all starts from, is not necessarily a lack of self love, but kind of a lack of understanding. You don't understand why people did you this way, so you have this idea that every person is going to be like those people. And when you have these bad experiences, this shouldn't be something that shapes your reality. It's very easy to be construed and to kind of compare people, but it's unfair when we do that. It's unfair when we compare new people to people of our past, because we dealt with, such a horrible person the last time we talked to someone. This next person, let's put them under that same lens. That's not fair to do. It's not fair to compare these people. And I feel like when we are trying so hard, it's easier to have a clean slate. If we're expecting, so much out of this person, it only makes sense that we're going to be hurt. We're going to be hurt because we want this person to be something that they're not. We have to be that thing that we are looking for. Your own type, your own, category of people has to be something that you're able to display on your own, or else how would you even find those like-minded people? If you have this feeling that truly there is no one good enough, we have to start with being good enough for ourselves. You have to be good enough on your own before anything. You have to have this feeling of, wow, I am capable. I can do these things. I am this person that can offer so much love, that can offer all these things. That part of yourself, that part of, going out of your way, I think is what we have to display more. It shouldn't be this, oh, well, I'm going to be negative about not feeling like a lot of people like me. You can be positive about it. You can be positive in showing other people that it's possible. And that in itself is showing love. That love now becomes something that other people are going to, get the chance to experience, because you're going out of your way. That's why you feel like no one is, good enough for you. No one is good enough for you because you don't feel like you're good enough for yourself. You aren't feeling like you are deserving of this love, and you're trying so hard to force other people to see that, and it can hurt yourself. Just because you've dealt with so much negativity in the past, and these people that have harmed you, you now have this idea that everyone is going to be like them. And really that's unfair. You haven't met everyone. You haven't met all these people that are going to be able to love you, that are going to be able to see your value. And it's unfair to set this precedent on just about everyone you meet. It makes sense to have this idea that no one will be good enough, that no one is going to love you because of the way you're able to love other people, when it's unfair. You have to have this idea that you are lovable. If you have it with optimism, you can understand that being that love and showing that love now allows it to come back to you. This now makes it a lot more easier to find you because you display it so freely. You are so, aware of what you are capable of, that now the other people that get the chance to experience your love, get to see this optimism. They get to see that it is out there, that it is possible. And when we kind of buy into this propaganda that, well, no one is able to love, so I'm not going to love anyone, it only makes it harder to actually find these people, to find these people that are for you. And I feel like in that, when I talk about finding people for you, I think you definitely have to be kind of like a mirror. Like it's kind of this idea that if you want someone who's loving and generous and kind, you have to be that same person yourself. And I feel like there's a lot of people that aren't saying that. A lot of people are saying what they want, but they don't actually want that. They don't actually display that same thing. They aren't going out of the way. And I think we have to start doing it. Just because you say you want one thing doesn't mean you act that way, especially when it comes to romance. So many people love romance but aren't romantic. And I think that's why romance is even dying, because people don't want to go out of their way to love other people. Like A lot of people love romance, but no one is romantic. People don't want to be vulnerable and make the first move and show someone how they feel because they're so scared. You have this ego that you're able to love these people, but you're only going to do it when people do it to you first. You have to realize that if everyone has this idea, no one is going to experience that level of love. No one is going to be able to have anything romantic happen in their life because they feel like they have to earn it first. They have to go out of their way to help other people. And if you have this idea for so long, it's only going to get harder to believe that there are people like that. If you are someone who is able to drop your pride and to be able to show love to people and make the first move, this is only going to show people that it's a lot more easier to be optimistic. It's a lot more easier to trust these people when they are trying to love you. How are you going to want love and really look for it when every time it comes your way, you deny it? You don't accept it. You have a feeling that there's ulterior motives there. And while it makes sense to have intuition, you have to make sure you're not sabotaging yourself. You have to make sure you're not hurting yourself in this sense. If you want to experience something that real, and I feel like so many people are stuck on that. So many people say, oh, well, I just don't feel like, no one is good enough. And even for me, in my own experience, I've had such hardships, such negativity and people that have made it seem like this is like the norm. This is something normal. This is how everyone is when we don't know. We have no idea. I think there's a big difference in even our opportunity and who we love. A lot of people say that they, have already had the love of their life. When I think there's a big difference. You've loved someone, you've had these relationships, but it doesn't have to be something that is now controlling you or making it, so much more than what it already is. There's a big difference in that, especially when we talk about having that love and being able to show that love to other people. We have to know that there's a big difference between the love of your life and the person that you've loved the most in your life. And I think a lot of people have had a long relationship or a few and kind of decided that this is their person, forever, and that they'll never get over them. When really you have no idea who you're going to meet. You have no idea the level of love that you haven't even gotten to just because you've experienced it with one person. When you are looking and finding new connections, if you constantly compare it to that same past one, you're never going to fully appreciate it. You're always going to be criticizing it and looking at it under a microscope because you are still stuck on that past experience. You have to be able to let go of these things and to appreciate they happen. It shouldn't be this thing of missing it or ruminating in that kind of sadness, but having the appreciation that it even existed. Now that when you move forward, you're able to form these new experiences without comparing it to anyone, without feeling like it has to end a certain way or start a certain way. You're able to have your own experiences and not put any expectations on it. Now when you get disappointed, it won't even hurt because you are aware that this is something new. This is something that won't necessarily go out of its way to hurt you, and nothing that you have to do will change that. And I think people have this overall idea, and I think it's damaging. And even then, it's so pessimistic that it kind of makes me question, like, okay, well, what are you looking for? What do you want? What idea do you have is so specific, so, emotional and in depth that you don't think other people are able to give that to you. You don't think other people are going to be able to provide you with this level of love, and it's just, it's hard. It's very hard to not only move on, not only have the optimism, but to accept that things happen. That is the biggest part of it. The biggest part is accepting that it doesn't have to, damage you, doesn't have to hurt you. I don't think a lot of people are realizing that when they say forgiveness. The biggest part about forgiveness is accepting that it doesn't have to hurt you. And learning that this thing doesn't have to hold you back, and that what that person did doesn't now determine your value, but it's something that you are able to move on from. And moving on from that and accepting that it happened is definitely the bigger portion of it. It isn't exactly the hurt that you are struggling with. It's accepting that it has happened to you, and I think a lot of people are stuck on that part of healing. And when we are trying to heal, you know, I feel like a lot of people have this idea that no one is good enough because they didn't heal properly. It's kind of like a bone, if you break your leg and you don't heal it properly, you're going to be stuck with this leg that, isn't fully mobile, it isn't fully, able to move. It's kind of messed up in this sense. It might feel intact, it might feel, okay, but when you're walking in the bone structure that you have with this leg now, it's still damaged because you didn't heal it properly, you know? And I think so many people kind of are like that with their own mindset and even their heart, when they are trying to find these things, it's impossible for them to do it properly because they never took that actual time to heal. And I think even beyond that, when I say, time to heal, it's not having just long time passes between hurt and hurt. It's using that time to restore what was hurt. There's such thing as actively healing. I feel like time will definitely pass and you won't always heal from it if you are ignoring it, especially when you're filling it with distractions that aren't going to help you at all. And when people are saying this, if they were able to heal, they would able to appreciate it. They would feel like, well, I have this optimism and I have these good things going for myself. If I'm able to move on in love, there's got to be other people that are out there that are able to move on in love. And we have to feel more comfortable with that idea. We have to feel more comfortable that, there is a reason to be optimistic, in today's world. And I think when we look for love and we're trying to find it and we're searching, this is something that we have to be okay with. There are people good enough. There are people that will know how to love you. Just because you haven't met them yet, it doesn't mean that you have to damage yourself anymore or change these things or to feel like there's anything less about you, because that's not the case. That isn't the thing that is taking away from you now, but you're able to appreciate it more. And I think we just have to learn that there are good things out there that are waiting to be experienced. But if we have this idea that they're not there, it's going to be so much easier to feel like it's not there. Your perception shapes your reality, and that includes love. We have to be better to ourselves in that sense, so that way people can be better to us.